everybody. Welcome to Badge Banter, where we feature some awesome stories about the importance of the photo ID as the foundation of an organization's overall security efforts. I'm Lindsay Martin-Nez from Badge Pass, and today we are joined by Lee Odess of the Access Control Executive Brief. Hey, Lee, thanks for being here.
Of course, always happy to do this, so thank you for the opportunity.
Well, before we kind of dive into today's discussion, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Access Control Executive Brief and what it is that you do?
Sure. Yeah, so think of Access Control Executive Brief as a community and content that's focused on the access control global marketplace. So we write a lot about the market in these monthly briefs that we put out. We have a Slack group where there's communication, and we put on some shows. We activate at shows. It's really, think of it as like I said, content and community focused on the access control market globally.
I found Access Control Executive Brief, I feel like it was about a year ago, last summer, and I've learned a lot from it. So if you don't already subscribe to it, I would definitely recommend it. And Lee did not pay me to say this, so he didn't even know I was going to hype it up. But anyway, today we are going to talk about probably one of the most well-discussed topics in the access control industry, at least this year, and the way that access control and kind of photo ID industries are coming together. And that is kind of the hot topic of mobile credentials versus physical credentials. And so I'm pretty vocal about my opinions on this and have been throughout the course of the year, but I feel like you have been too, Lee. And so what I was hoping we could kind of dive into today is maybe what the talk and hype in the industry is versus what it feels like the actual reality of it is right now.
Yeah, no, we definitely let's get into that. Do you want me to kick off and go?
Go.
All right. So yeah, I think I would summarize it as this: there's a handful of trends and things that are happening in the marketplace that companies are using to differentiate. I would call the legacy to the new, and let's be real, marketing and communications is not necessarily a strength within our industry. So what we typically do is we market the features and functions of our systems and say, for instance, mobile, for those that got on mobile first and quick, they were able to say, we have it first, we have it, here it is, it's different. So with that, it sort of, it took off in a lot of the conversation. The second effect that you have there is that Apple finally stepped in and participated in this conversation, so call it the Apple effect. There was a release of how they done it. It's been somewhat controlled on who was participating. So then when you have scarcity as well as a differentiated sort of product feature, a lot of people start to communicate it. I would say then the third part of it is that our industry has been predominantly offline in the marketing, right? You have salespeople that go around, we do trade shows, and then there's magazines. Then this thing called the internet came about, and you had LinkedIn specifically, and you would have a distribution model that was a little bit different than the traditional, I would call it slower communication model. So all of a sudden you've had this world of people that are able to communicate and showcase and tell a different story around mobile. So if you were to take differentiated feature set of product, the Apple effect, and then online, you started to see these two worlds of, you would believe that all of a sudden everything is moving to mobile and cards are going to go and everything else is going to go away because the people that were messaging that in the format that they were doing it along with Apple would want you to believe that, which in some cases is not wrong. I'm sorry, one last one I would say too is that we as an industry have a binary conversation continuously. It's this or that. For whatever reason, we have a hard time holding two thoughts in our head that might even be competing at the same time, and we wanted to just make it very black and white. So that was causing people to say it's either going to be mobile or nothing else. That invokes emotions that people get, so it also heightens the visibility to it. So put all those together, and that would bring us to the current state that we are, where it comes with about mobile.
I think what you said is so true. It's definitely a perception. And for me, I've been trying to be pretty vocal on it isn't one or the other. Instead, it should be like the coexistence of the two technologies. And what I think is interesting is you're right. If you hopped on LinkedIn today, you would feel like everybody's moving to mobile, 100%, adoption rates through the roof. And if you're not doing mobile, you're like so far behind, you're going to get left in the dust. And then when you look at like the reality of what people are using in the real world on a daily basis, they're still using cards, a lot of them. And it was interesting. I saw HID just put out their State of the Security Industry report. I forget what it was called, so sorry if I just botched that. But they were talking about key trends in the industry, and one of the trends, of course, in access control is mobile. But looking at the percentages that were reported in that, statistically speaking, the majority of people are not using mobile credentials still to this day. They're still using badges, or they're planning on using them like in conjunction with, and there's a ton of reasons why people aren't moving. Primarily, people still have a need for physical representation of who people are, budgetary reasons, all kinds of stuff like that. But in your opinion, do you think that this trend of talking about it like it's everywhere, but it kind of being slower to move will continue? And where do you kind of see this going over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perfectly fine to have the conversation. It's called marketing. Like, and the reality is, depending on who you are and where you're at, it is true. For some of these companies that all they do are mobile, and in the world and the customers that they work with, that is all that they're using in a lot of cases.
Yep.
And then it doesn't mean, it's sort of like the EV community of cars doesn't need to take the burden of educating people on gasoline cars at the same time. Like, that's just not what they're in the business of doing. They're selling cars, like EV cars, right? So there's no different on this side. I just think it shows the sort of maturity of our industry that we get somewhat red in the face about it in a lot of ways, and I understand why, because it's sort of like it doesn't match the reality in the market. It's marketing. Now, I do think the quicker and sooner we get to a conversation around and versus or, like you're talking about, and the realities of what happens in the marketplace, the better it would be. But I just think that comes along with sort of the maturation of the technology and the adoption, and it will. Because right now, again, I've been early on talking about, like, great, we put a card in the phone. I don't care. I care, but I don't care. I want to talk about what the value that it creates. So once we get past the hype cycle of it being this new shiny thing and we get into the actual value creation stories, I think that's when we'll start to see the reality stories also come into play around how people are applying them and using them, and it will be a combination of both. I also believe there's a differentiation on how you view the marketplace. For people that view the market at the $10 billion, that's what Omdia said our industry is, access control marketplace, all this old truths come along with that as well. If you believe it's $100 billion opportunity in marketplace globally, then you can understand how the majority will be probably mobile in the end. Whereas in the traditional side, if you would, this is where I have a conversation currently right now where the mainstream, if you want to call it that, I call our industry cottage industry, high security, $10 billion marketplace, majority of that's probably going to be cards to start, and because of just the way that it works. If you open up to the $10 billion or $100 billion marketplace, the visitor mobile and the regular, like, just the percentages are going to be there. So, like, when I think about HID's report, it's probably a reality of where the marketplace currently is now in the high security marketplace, so that will track that. That's why all of these reports, honestly, when I talk to I usually get a preview to most of them from these companies, and I have a conversation with them, and they don't tell you enough about specifically who the people are that they're talking about, because it's somewhat like drinking your own bathwater in some ways, where they ask the customer base that they currently have what's happening, and it's sort of this weird, like, I forgot what they call it, but it's sort of, there's a prejudice there of sort of getting the answers back of the questions you ask from the people on that end. So in reality, sure, it doesn't surprise me. But if I was to take the flip side of, let's say, wavelengths, for instance, compared to HID on that end, they're starting with a base of very limited. So most of their percentages are mobile. So which one is true? Both. It just matters now, I would say, at the size and scale of what we're talking about, of where it would matter, and the applications of it. And I think folks like yourself, I would like to say, I won't speak on your behalf, but you're kind of in the same camp that I am. It's like, great. Let's now talk about the value creation that it's doing. Who cares who's first? Who cares, like, that you have it? Like, let's just, at some point, everybody's got it now. So, like, can we talk about the value that it's doing and the truths about where the marketplace is? Because it's only going to help the customers, I believe, adopt even greater if we have more honest conversations about what's actually happening in the market.
I agree, absolutely. I think that there's two things there. One, I think that you're right. There's definitely places and verticals where mobile is always going to be the number one player, and if you're a new facility and you've never even had physical badges before, like that's kind of a no-brainer to me. But two, I think that what we don't talk about enough, and even I don't talk about enough, and you brought up today, was it's not just about a comparison between like physical badges and mobile badges as they relate to like employees today. There's visitors and all other types of card holders that maybe we don't historically think about that make sense in the market, and would be using some type of credential at some point. And so the market's a lot bigger. It's just, what are we going to do with those credentials once we can give them to somebody? Like now we have to bring some value to it. So
Yeah. I mean, I saw this weekend someone posted on LinkedIn. It was a guy, I believe, was in India that I got to know, and they were talking about mobile, but being used for transit in a lot of ways, and it was all about pay. Actually, it's the Orbit card. It was the ease of which that card can be. You can get a ticket, you can pay for a ticket, then you can use it to get on. I mean, in some sense, you can say that's access control, like it is. But when I asked him, like, "Hey, can you get in a building?" He's like, "Yeah, you can." What was funny was it wasn't even part of his conversation. It was more about a operational efficiency and revenue generation story. That the byproduct was that you could actually then go use it to get into things, right? So again, this is just the maturing of our way we message and market, as well as the expansion of the marketplace. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, we could probably talk about this all day, and Lord knows I could for sure. But I think that's
We kind of do, don't we?
we kind of do
Yeah,
talk
I
about
was
it all
gonna say,
day.
I think we do.
But that's probably enough for this mini session. So I appreciate you hopping on and taking a few minutes to chat with me today, Lee.
I will always do it. So thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate everything that you do. So thank you.
Thanks so much. We hope you'll join us next time as we take you beyond the badge.